Good morning, and thank you all for joining us here today. We requested to have this press conference to give the community an update on an operation that we've ran over the last 6 weeks in terms of crime violence which was occurring in Pompano Beach. Let me just recap why we end up arriving to this moment in terms of this operation. For several weeks, we had received information from our city officials as well as our district command about the increase in gun violence which was taking place in Northwest Pompano. We've seen cases where drive-by shootings occurred, innocent kids were struck, and victimology across the spectrum from kids to mothers to fathers to brothers, as you can imagine, lost their life. And so we wanted to put forth an operation to send a strong message out to these individuals, typical gang members, typical violent offenders, that we weren't going to tolerate it. We were going to combine our efforts in terms of both state, local, and federal partners and pursue the most egregious of criminals in this community. And the operation was launched. Operation Trigger Lock was a successful operation which expanded over 6 weeks. And before I get into some more of the details about the operation, I must take a moment to thank and recognize some of our partners who are here today. To begin with, internally, Colonel John Hell, who leads up the Executive Department of Professional and Standards and Regulation, Joe Aculary, our major in SID, Major David Elwood, who is now the new commander over in Pompano District, Major Tom Palmer, and our federal partners as well. I'm going to go through individual names related to our state officials who participated in this from the state attorney's office, and then I'm going to touch briefly on our federal partners who are standing alongside of us today. To begin with, I'd like to thank our state attorney for providing his members of the drug trafficking unit, beginning with Denise Nooner, Drug Trafficking Assistant State Attorney Kristen Ney, Drug Trafficking Assistant State Attorney Luis Garcia, and this brings me into recognizing our federal partners, which include the ATF, Special Agent in Charge Elizabeth Morales, DEA Miami Division, Special Agent in Charge Dina Rutter, FBI, Miami Field Office, Supervisor Special Agent Jeff Croak, HSI Fort Lauderdale, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Jose Figueroa, and not here, but always present in our operational tempos, are members of the HIDTA Task Force, led up through Executive Director Hugo Boria, who couldn't be here today. Now with that, why is this such a significant operation? I think it's detailed in the performance index that we've been able to reach. On the high end, we executed 14 search warrants within residents across the county. We had 132 arrests, 38 firearms ranging from AK-47s to high-capacity Glocks with 30-round magazines, AR-15s, and you name it, were also part of these guns that were seized. And we've been able to arrest 3 documented gang members who have been consistently problematic for this community, and 1 federal indictment has already been executed. As you look at the different type of violent offenders that we dealt with, there's a cross spectrum of type of criminalities and crimes that these members were arrested for, whether it be active charges or warrants. Some of those charges consist of robberies with firearms, trafficking, and 5 murder charges were also part of this investigation. The message I want to send out is that we're not done. Although this operation has been completed, we will continue to have a high tempo in the northwest part of Pompano and continue to work investigations that we already have acquired and continue to move forward with taking the worst of the worst off the streets. But that is not the end. Part of the things that needs to take place that I've discussed in numerous gang forums, shooting, violence forums that's been occurring in Pompano, meeting with pastors, meeting with city officials, is that the ultimate goal needs to be how do we adjust and change the quality of life for the people who live in Northwest Pompano. The criminality cannot just be a law enforcement response in terms of we put together operations, we come out, we risk our lives, we chase down the bad people, but yet it becomes cyclical because there's other community-based issues that are not being resolved, whether it be employment, job opportunities, education. These are the things that have consistently been problematic, specifically in the northwest part of Pompano Beach. And so I'm happy. I know we have 2 city officials here today in attendance who have been in partnership as we had dialogue about what needs to take place, whether it be nuisance abatements, code enforcement components, or just going after some of these areas where there's been repeated loitering and gang violence and shootings in different businesses. So we've given them the roadmap about some of the things that the city needs to work on. We're going to support them, and we're going to continue as the law enforcement practitioners and the guardians of this community, whether it be state, federal, or local, to continue to go out and target and take these violent offenders off the street. With that, I'm going to pause for a second and allow you all to ask any specific questions about this operation. Just briefly in a synopsis, this was related to individuals who had committed a shooting over in Hollandale. We worked collectively with the Hollandale Beach Police during this operation as the suspects had resided and lived in Pompano, and quite frankly, had their own histories with our city and our agencies for quite some time. So again, we put forth these operations, and you never know what you're going to find, right? Initially, it's let's go after the current violent offenders, let's reduce the amount of gun violence that's been occurring in the community, and as we're doing that, we're literally taking people off who have shot at vehicles. Most of the individuals, as you can see, were armed. So it's nice that we got them off the street and got them in custody without having to track them down over a span of several months. Correct. And again, that's a snapshot of really 132. And as I went through these arrests, line item by line item, and reading what my investigators had encountered, I'm delighted that we didn't have to kill somebody out here. These are some very bad, violent individuals, armed to the teeth, at times having more firepower than we do, and yet we've been able to execute this high-level risk operation for 6 weeks and almost do it flawlessly. And that's a shout out to our crime suppression team in Pompano, our district commander, and how they've been managing this collectively with our SID components, and our federal partners who are out here patched, armed, guns with us side by side. Yeah, look, I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a Band-Aid, right? There's a lot more significance when we're taking weapons off, and I understand your point. But you're right, this happens every single year, time and time again, and it doesn't matter what sheriff have stood amongst this community and talked about the issues of violence that's occurring in Northwest Pompano or any other segment of this community. Law enforcement practitioners, it's our obligation, it's our responsibility to go after the worst of the public. But as an academic, someone who studies this and researches and analyzes, these problems are systemic of environmental issues, economic issues, lack of education, employment, all these variables that exist that impact the quality of life of the residencies allow for criminal behavior to occur. So if we're fixing one element, what's imperative is that the city officials start to focus on the other side of it. It's typical of how we do high-risk joint operations behind closed doors. However, due to the high volume of requests about what are we doing, how are we going to go after this, I thought it was imperative to put together a task force to show what we already do, but to highlight how imperative it is for us to start changing the culture and the quality of life in these areas, or we're going to keep having the same problem. This will not be the last press conference that we do related to gun violence. That goes without saying. But we can change this if collectively, county, city, and all government officials, the elected folks like myself, are taking bold actions and putting forth policies and programs that make sense and help mitigate overall crime in these areas. Well, what I will tell you, when we launched this investigation, there was a two-phase approach. All right, phase one was about collecting viable intelligence, whether it be through technology, gang informants giving us content, social media, our real-time crime center, and all the different resources that we offer at BSO to track down and start identifying what is taking place behind closed doors. A lot of these individuals, like everyone else in the United States, is on social media, and they're very bold and brazen about putting out content and what's occurring. Now, as we use our investigative practices to put forth with leads, it allows us to go into phase two, which was the operational side, where now we're out, we're executing an arrest warrant, we're out in the community executing search warrants, and we're taking people off the street. So that two-phase approach allows us to use social media, but what I would say is, in our investigative practices, we also found that we were having a deterrence effect with the criminals, the chatter amongst them. Hey, you know, the sheriff is out there and they're looking for RICO charges, and the ATF is out there, and the FBI is out there, and the HSI. When they start seeing this collective swell hitting the community, it does serve a deterrence factor, but it's short term. Some of these folks are going to get right back into the saddle, right back into their criminal behavior, and we're going to be chasing them again. It's a combination. You know, it was most certainly at the town hall, but it was before the town hall. We marched throughout the community. Pastors, the mayor, commissioners, city officials, and as we're navigating through the community, astonishing, we heard that the community was supporting us, that they wanted law enforcement in their communities. This misnomer that people don't want to see police, that's such a negative. The folks in these communities have to live with it every day more than we do. They're the ones that's pushing their kids away from the front window because there's bullets flying. They're the ones who can't sit in their living rooms anymore because there's a threat of some gang violence occurring down the street. So yes, listening to the community, but more importantly, responding. And so we responded as an agency. I want to see the county government respond, and I want to see the city officials respond. Because if not, as I said before, Joanne, we're going to be right back here in a matter of months with another press conference about what law enforcement done. But where is the major impact? We talked about a few issues or things that we can jointly work together on. I talked about this nuisance abatements aspect. There are some regions and some specific businesses that are safe havens for these criminals and allowing for gun violence, of drive-by shootings to occur, drug trafficking to occur. We need to see the city officials take a harder stance when it comes to holding these businesses accountable. And if they're not going to be partners in a safe and prosperous community, then perhaps they should go to another community. Perhaps they should go to another city. But to allow these businesses to be used as safe havens are problematic for this entire community. Secondly, I go back to the educational aspect. It is the great equalizer in this country. I grew up in the inner cities of North Philadelphia, was homeless twice, and lived in a 500 square foot apartment or row home. And yet education has allowed me to crawl my way out of those environments and stand here as a chief law enforcement officer of the largest public safety organization in the state of Florida. That's the power of education. More importantly, employment opportunities. I am not an elected city official or a county administrator or a county commissioner in any of that aspect. But I'm also intelligent enough to know that these problems that we're facing in Broward County are not exclusively things that law enforcement has to fix and should be tackling by itself. I think that's probably a viable option. It's something I've expressed to them. Before, in a different life as a law enforcement officer, I was in command of the substations in Coral Springs, and part of my process was to work with the businesses, work with the landlords, and ensure that we were doing things that impact the quality of life of the community. Part of that was going after the businesses, the term slumlord, which we're all familiar with, those landlords who don't even live in Pompano Beach. They've invested in Pompano Beach, but they may be in New York, they may be in California, and they're disconnected to the issues that are happening to the people who reside there. These are things that city officials and county officials can take the lead on to support our ability to reduce these crimes from happening. When it came to the gun violence and the increase in spike, it was a Pompano Beach issue in the sense that our city officials, our district command wanted to execute and put together an operation, but this is indicative to most crime patterns that occur throughout this entire county. When you see gun violence increases and violent crimes occurring, these aren't happening in the most wealthy environments of Broward County. We're not facing these issues in those environments. We're facing these issues in the environments where the quality of life is so poor and the lack of education funding, all the things I already mentioned, are impacting people's ability to focus on trying to be productive citizens. We have kids in these communities who are looking at drug dealers as heroes because they're driving around in the fancy cars and they got the gold chains around their necks and they look the part, but they're actually the problem. So we need to start building up environments where the youth and the long-term residents who have been in these cities for decades on, multiple generations, are not gentrified out of the communities, but the communities are uplifted around them. We have a theme here, consistent in this country and consistent in Broward County, that there are great areas in Broward County that once upon a time were heavily populated by people of color, lower economic status, and then those communities become gentrified and invested in, and next thing you know, multi-million-dollar complexes are developing. And it costs $3 million to live in a condo. And so then the entire environment begins to develop. Let's get more businesses there. Let's get more restaurants there. Folks, you understand what I'm talking about. Everyone in here has seen this at some point or some degree. You don't have to be a law enforcement officer to recognize the inequalities that exist. So when those inequalities they're never going to be fair, they're never going to be 100% balanced out. But the greater we can increase and uplift and bring some level of balance, there will be a reduction in criminal patterns that exist in this county and across this country. Again, I want to thank all of our partners from our internal organization in terms of BSO personnel, our district commanders out in Pompano, our crime suppression team, Viper, Titan, BAT, all our groups, and of course all our federal partners who took the time out to answer the call when I said I need more help and let's get this done. So thank you all and have a good day.